Greetings, you absolute beautiful people. Hope everyone is well and having a great day. If not, then this video might cheer you up just a little bit. In this video, we are going to be painting up one of the Chaos Possessed, and specifically, I'm going to be concentrating on a gnarly skin recipe. So as you've just seen in the video, it's not a painted green. I've just added some texture, which is what I do on a lot of my miniatures on their armor, just to add a little bit of texture to the armor and make it look a little bit more worn. This was just using liquid green stuff stippled on in 2 to 3 layers, depends on how crusty you want it to look, and then we've come into some priming. So I originally primed it black, and then into the areas that I want the skin, just so I don't have to spend a lot of layers building up that opacity, I've just gone in there with some grey primer and built that up over the top. We are going to be painting back over some of the overspray armor areas a little bit later on, so if you do want to prime yours in a grey primer, then just do that. So the first colour that we're going to apply to his skin is Vallejo Siccubus skin. This is a really nice dark pinkish tone, which is going to act as a great foundation for us to build up on a little bit later, and it'll act as the shadow on the skin. Now, for all the people that don't have an airbrush, or just the airbrush police in general that do like to jump down my throat on these videos for using an airbrush, you don't need an airbrush for this part of the video, or any part of the video in that fact. It's just a case, if you want to do it via brush, then please use a brush application, and again, just like I'm doing with the airbrush, just build it up in a couple of thin layers. Once you've completed that, we're going to come in with the mid-tone highlights for our skin, and for this I'm going to use Citadel's Cadian flesh tone, and I've applied this almost in a zenithal type motion from above, and for our final highlight we're going to use Citadel's Deepkin flesh. That's going to be our final highlight. It might look a little bit bright on the video or a little bit too highlighted, but this is done purposely, as we're going to be toning this back quite a lot throughout the video. Again, if you've not got an airbrush, I only like to use airbrushes on skin because it looks really nice and smooth, but again, if you've got these colours and you want to apply them via a brush, you can do that as well. And I always recommend going over and checking out the Artist Opus way of dry brushing, as this is it's a fantastic way, and if anything, it'll pick out those raised areas and you'll be able to build up these layers upon layers, even just using the dry brushing method, and don't worry about even going on to some of the other areas. Now I'm going to apply some acrylic filters using Citadel washers, and for this first one I have got Berserker bloodshade, and this is sort of where having an airbrush really comes into play, and you'll really get the benefits of an airbrush as everything goes on really nice and smooth. Again, however, if you don't have an airbrush, you can just apply these via brushes around some of the recess areas like the pipes and stuff. And then after I've applied the Berserker bloodshade, I came in with some purple Citadel, I think it's duchi violet, but again, if you've got some contrast paints, you can even use some purple contrast paints or red contrast paints, and it's just about getting creative at this stage. You know, if you want your skin to look a bit more on the yellow side, you can add some yellow filters, but again, I'm only applying these around areas which look a little bit sore, but because we're going for that chaosy, mottled, awful skin, I applied it to those areas like where the pipes are, showing some soreness and redness as though those pipes are ripping through his skin. But one thing I wish I'd added to this model, and I'm really kicking myself for it, which would have improved the look of the skin tenfold, was to add some mottling. But if you want to check this out and see it in action, it's basically just getting some of your inks and just splattering with like a splatter effect just all over the skin, and as we move up the layers, these will make it look like there's some mottling sat under the skin or some bruised areas. But if you want to see that in action, then go over and check out my Tyrannys video. I think it was the one where it's army painting better than Games Workshop, and you'll sort of see it in action. But after you've got your skin foundation down comes, unfortunately, the boring part where you need to paint the rest of your miniature at this stage due to the overspray, or if you're going to use a dry brush method, you're naturally going to need to go in and paint the rest of the miniature. So I used AK black, or you can use Citadel's Abbadon black to paint the black armor. After that, all the gold trim was done with AK Rusty Gold, and then I used some Iron Warriors for all these silver areas, and the red areas were painted with AK Burnt Red. And finally, all the bone areas were given a base coat of Citadel's Karak Stone. And I know I always gloss over base coat colours, but I'm sure you don't want to sit here for the next portion, 10 minutes of the video, just me painting, base coating everything out. It's the later stages that are really going to transform this miniature. Which brings us on to the first of our flesh wash applications. Now this is just a unifying wash all over the flesh, and for this I am using the new Phase 2 Villainy Caput mortum, which is a gorgeous reddish brown, and this will also dry to a satin to gloss depending on how much you thin it with mineral spirits. And again, this is an enamel paint, and the beauty of enamels is that we can remove them and add some mottling and play with that paint even after it has dried. Now I know the Phase 2 tester kits has currently, I think by the time this video will launch, it has actually finished for the pre-sale, but these are coming early next year. So if you do want to grab some of these, then keep your eye out on the Grimdark compendium for when these come out again. But you know, if you're not confident with enamels and stuff like that, you could get away with this section of the video done with Citadel's Targor Raid Shade, I think it's called. But again, this is an enamel and we can't play with it, we can't get that nice mottling, we can't reactivate it or anything like that, so this is why I prefer to use enamels. Now I thin this 1:1 with mineral spirits on a dry palette, something like a large Citadel base works perfect, and I'm just literally coating this all over the skin of this Chaos Marine. And again, this is just unifying wash because we can come back in and remove it with some mineral spirit. So I'll give it around 10 to 15 minutes to dry after I've applied it all over the flesh areas. And I do leak it up onto some of the armor to make it look like it's bleeding or just chaos, just being just awful, just leaking onto armor. But once it's dried, I come in with a sponge or a Q-tip and I slowly start to dab away and remove it from these sections that I want. And the beauty of using like the dabbing motion is that you can leave some of it behind, and when it dries again, it'll go on there nice and mottled, giving us that grimdark skin. Whilst the skin section is drying, we're going to address the rest of the miniature, and for this I'm going to give everything a unifying wash of Villainy Inks Goons Grime. Again, this is an enamel just like the Caput mortum, and I'm applying it in the exact same way and removing it in the exact same way as what we did with the Caput mortum, thinning it 1:1 with mineral spirits. And if you want to go for a bit more of a heavier application down near the feet, then you can just apply it neat. And you will notice as well that I do go on to some of the skin areas, and this is fine because, you know, this miniature is not going to be running around getting grime everywhere, and then he's not going to get it onto his skin, so it's fine if you want to brush a little bit up onto his legs or areas where you think, well, you know, you're going to get a bit of grime accumulation there as well. And again, it just creates a little bit of variation. But I just work my way around, applying it with a brush. There's no like unifying washes of airbrushes like I do in other videos, and give that around 15 to 20 minutes to dry, or you can use a blow dryer to speed it up. But before I come in with the removal process, I want to add a little bit of a rust filter to the black armoured areas. And for this, I'm just using Villainy Inks Sector Rust. I'm not going mad, I'm not trying to get the rusty look, we're not going to be putting any Dirty Downs rust or anything like that onto this miniature, but I just wanted to add a slight filter of rust to some of the areas. And then once that has dried, grab your sponge or Q-tip and start to remove that enamel from the areas that you desire, or you can simply blend them into each other. To push the contrast of this miniature even further, and just to add some deeper rich shadows, or just overall just make everything stand out a little bit more, for some of the armor sections or any sections that you want to add some shadows or contrast, I'm going to use Villainy Inks Decrepit Filth. This is probably my favoritist enamel from the Phase 2 launch, and it's one that I pretty much use in all of my miniature painting, as it's very like the Goons Grime, as it's got that slight granular effect, but because it's that darkish brown black wash, it is just perfect for giving your miniatures that extra punch and contrast. Now we're going to readdress that skin and really bring this miniature to life, and for this I'm going to be applying some Villainy Inks Carrion Crimson. Now you might think I'm using a lot of enamels during this video, and yes I am, because they're my favouriteest thing to paint with, especially when you can like manipulate them, take them off, move them around. But the beauty of Carrion Crimson, which is available right now, and I'd highly recommend this paint if you're just going to do some Grimdark skin or Grimdark painting, because it's got a ton of uses for application section, it does have a slight granule and these little tiny pigments inside that once dry leaves that mottling behind that I spoke about earlier on top of the rest of your miniature. And the beauty of it is you can start to manipulate and push these little pigments about, and that's what I do. So I apply it neat straight from the bottle, and then just with a clean brush with a tiny amount of mineral spirits on, that's when you can start to play with it and blend it and have fun with it. And even if you wipe it off, you can just apply some more, which you don't get that with acrylics. So if you've never used enamels, then I'd highly recommend going out and trying some, because it will completely transform the way that you paint and push your miniatures more into that grimdark aesthetic. And once that starts to dry, because the carrion crimson dries satin to glossy, you're going to get the most realistic looking skin that you've ever seen. So you can have some areas that are slightly matte, some areas that are satin, and some areas that are gloss with these tiny little pigments in. Now, because I said right at the beginning that we need to apply the skin bit a little bit too highlighted, and we're really going to dull it down, which we have done, we need to start to fetch them highlights back a little bit. And for this, I'm going to use an oil paint, and I'm going to use Abtelung 502's Dust. Tiniest amount on my brush. I remove most of the pigment from my brush, and I just dab a little bit onto areas like the eyebrows or his muscles, or any areas that you want to add some highlights and definition to your miniature. And because we've got it on really thinly, it's not going to start to play with those enamels that we've previously done. However, if it does start to manipulate those, then let it blend, let it play. Again, this comes back to the fun that we're having, where you can create some truly amazing blends and skin recipes from using oils and enamels. But just work your way around and highlight any areas. I'm not going mad with this section. We're not like just highlighting every single part. It's just very minimal areas where I'm paying attention to those highlights. This stage is completely optional, but I do like to add it as a little bit of visual interest, and I've just got some Abtelung 502 smoke. If you want to do this with acrylics, then feel free to do with it acrylics as well, but be sure that you've given ample time for your enamels and oils to dry, as you don't want to affect it too much. But because I'm using an oil, you can sort of get away with it, and that means I can manipulate those little ichors and black streaks down into whatever I want. And these are just going to act as some nasty little ichors that this guy's got dripping from parts of his body. Then finally, the last thing that we're going to do for our skin is to apply some blood for the blood glow. I know I mainly applied this to the axe areas, just as though this guy's chopped somebody up. But under his armour, in his midsection on his abdomen, I did add a little bit there as well, and some splats just to simulate this guy's bleeding, and it's really sore, and it's caused this guy to get those blood coming out of his pores and everything like that, which leans more into the ichors as well. As I said right at the beginning of this tutorial, this is more of a skin colour flesh recipe, but just to show you some things I added to the miniature to finish him off were the gold trim. I just wanted to highlight that a little bit more, and I used Scale Colour 75's Peridot Alchemy. The base was finished off with some kraut cover, a tale of Grimdark. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial, so I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope this has given you a bit of inspiration to really start to push the realism of your miniatures and the surface finish variation, because on this miniature now we've got the nice matte grimy armour along with that satin to glossy finish of the skin, just fetching, tying everything together to give it that ultra realistic grimdark, so awful chaos skin. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you could just hit that like button, please just take 1 second out your day, because I'm nearly at 30,000 subscribers. So if you just want to press that like button, it means that this video will get out more and it'll help me, and then I can keep producing more content. So thanks for watching this video, guys. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description below to check out the villainy inks, some of the affiliate links, everything like that, all that good stuff. And if you're new to this channel, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, guys, and until next time, I will catch you in my next video.